Hey, Dad.
Hey everybody. Part of sort of some ongoing work, I've been talking about converting Blackmoor from 3.5 to 5e D&D. And today what I'm going to talk to you about is the Thrall of Coot. If you have been watching the campaign at all fairly consistently, you'll see that somehow in the background the Coot is sort of lurking. Right? And the Egg of Coot, of course, was established by Dave Arneson as sort of a really malleable opponent, major villain, a macro villain for folks to sort of interact with. And a lot of what Dave did is Dave wanted us to have these massive epic pieces that we could port into our own game and do what we want with. And very consistently and very consciously, he made the Egg of Coot undefined. And Egg of Coot has some characteristics in it. There's the land of the Egg of Coot that's been pretty specified in the Blackmoor map. If I move myself out of the way here, the Egg of Coot is this island right here. That's the land of the Egg of Coot. And what he did is if you go there, you don't remember coming back out of it in very, very few circumstances. So there was actually a baron from Glendower who invaded and tried to take it to sort of bring back his spouse. You know, and he and his army couldn't remember what they'd seen. And in the MMORPG, when Dustin Klingman and I were writing for Dave, we did an episode called the All the Eggs Men, which isn't canon but was blessed by Dave, where you got a feeling and you found out about what was going on there, but you come back out of it and you can't remember. And what that lets us do is, Dungeon Masters, as game masters, and also as players, is make it very specific to our own campaign so we can do what we want with it, so it becomes specific to you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take something that we developed in 3.5, and we did it with Dave, called the Thrall of Coot. And what that reflects is a possession that occurs for willing people and unwilling people, where they're taken over and dominated by the thrall, by the Egg of Coot, and they become his thralls. And they are sometimes allowed to have their own agency and intelligence, and sometimes they're dominated and taken over. And so I'm going to sort of walk through that, and I'm going to show you kind of how I've moved it from 3.5 to 5e, and how you can do the same sort of conversion process with pretty much anything if you're trying to make a template. Now, one of the things that 5e doesn't have as formalized as 3.5 did is the concept of a template. In 5e we had, or 3.5, we had all sorts of templates, right? We had legendary templates, we had, your dire template, we had your, just a lycanthrope was a template. You had all these different things that you could port over a stat block and make some changes to. And in 5e, we talk about that a little bit, like Half Dragon is a template. You can see that in the Core Monster Manual and also out in the SRD material. But it's not as formalized, and that's okay. 5e is very, very flexible in that way. But what I've done is I've built a basic palette of things that convert directly from the 3.5 Thrall over to the sort of 5e adaptation. One of the things that I have very, very much tried to do as I am, building a campaign, is make the Thrall, or make the Coot, sort of sinister. I've tried to make him almost, Chthonic, Lovecraftian in terms of the impacts and the insidious nature of his presence. And the Thralls in that way, in terms of how I'm interpreting them and converting them, very much become his agents. And because a template, you can take it, because it's a template, and because the Coot can pretty much do whatever he wants based on canon, that template you can lay over top of all sorts of different creatures. You can lay over top of it, whatever you want. So you could make it part of a fighter, a mage, a sorcerer, a warlock, or you can take different creatures and lay over top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of walk you through really quick what the original Thrall kind of looked like in 3.5, and then I'm going to lay out sort of the conversion process for you. And I'm using a couple sources. I'm going to just show you the Adobe Acrobat PDF of the Blackmoor campaign book, which is where most of the material is. And then I'm going to show you a Word document that I just used to work through it. And I'm going to show you a couple stages, just taking the 3.5 information, taking the different components, converting that over to 5e, then applying that specifically to creature. It's, you know, D&D 5e SRD, so you can see how that changes it and that morphs them and it makes them more powerful, a little bit more interesting. So as we dive into it, let's go. Thank you very much for hopping in to watch, by the way. Always appreciate folks coming to see me. And got a couple things for you. All right, I'm going to move me up in the corner here, make me a little bit less kind of in your way. And all right, so first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the Adobe document. Now what this talks about is, you know, this is a really good book if you're interested in Blackmoor. This is probably the most extensive book. You can get the campaign book, Dave Arneson's Blackmoor campaign book, out at Drive-Thru RPG. And that's where, you know, pretty much the entire 3.5 line is, and also a whole bunch of the old expert stuff and copies of the even older material. But really good book, and if you keep your eyes peeled, a lot of times you'll see the Blackmoor stuff, the entire package go up on sale, and I've seen quite a few people pick that up. I have paper copies. I have a few signed by Dave, which is awesome, and also the book that I wrote for him too is out there too, called Riders of Hawk, which deals with the Peshwa, which was really the piece of Blackmoor that Dave gave me to write. But anyhow, Thrall of Coot. Let's zip in here a little bit. So, all right. Thrall of Coot. Thralls are living beings that have been subdued by the egg's mental domination. The mental enchantment feeds off the brain activity and infests the whole body of its host. It cannot be seen or removed by physical means. Once a being becomes a Thrall of Coot, death is usually the only means of liberation. And that's the core of what a thrall is. And I think taking that and porting it over to 5e is what's critical here. And what this leads with is a sample Thrall of Coot, but then it really breaks down into what the Thrall of Coot is. And what I've done is I took all this information just for ease of use for all of us. Yes, and this is how you metagame. PJ's in the stream with us, and PJ's an awesome guy. PJ is one of the writers from the old Blackmoor MMORPG, and he plays Idris Regan in my campaign. And he's also a gifted designer, and he knows Blackmoor lore forwards and backwards, and has helped me quite a bit. And of course, he's watching my call mechanics, my thrall mechanics and design, because, well, you know, metagaming, which he has, you know, proficiency in. So anyhow, let me sort of hop over here and show you Word. All right, so what I've done with the Word document here is I have pretty much ported in all the text here, and I walk through it and I talk about the acquired template, and it has abilities derived from its mental link to the Egg Coot. So you got a bunch of stuff here. I ported that in completely. You've got your size and type, you've got your hit dice, you've got the speed, which is the same as the base creature, and a C bump. Attacks, and what's constant here is the attacks really aren't modified by being a Thrall of Coot. What the Thrall of Coot does is it makes the person that's been infected or dominated physically more resilient, and it makes them more adept at casting spells. So those two things put together have some really interesting applications when you lay it over top of it. But the physical attacks are the same. So if you have an example that was in the book, a Balborn Orc uses a longsword and fights and has some spells, but its attacks are still constant. So special attacks really don't apply. You've got a list of things here that I'll go through. Now, they did give the Thrall a +8 bonus on Arcana check, Spellcraft, and you're going to see the Fast Healing, the Mage's Sight, Magical Puissance, all these different abilities. I'm going to go through, and I'm going to hit step by step what decisions I made to convert and that I apply. So 2 to 5e. Let me see if I can, let's see, right here. So, size and type. All right, let's take a look at that. It says the base creature's type changes to aberration. It retains its subtypes. That's easy. All right, so we just make it in 5e. It becomes an aberration. It says change all current and future non-hit dice to d8s. All right, well, we don't really worry about that in 5e, so it's size-based. So if you convert a large creature over, it goes to d10s. If you can create a small creature over, it goes to d6s, goes to d8s. And of course, one of the things you can do in 5e with a monster is if you want to engineer the hit points, you can. But basically you don't have the same, it becomes this class or that becomes that class based on whether it's an aberration or a monster or a beast or whatever. It's based on size. So we just port that over. We're going to use the same base speed. All right. So armor class, what I've done, of course, in 5e we don't really have special qualities and special abilities. We basically have traits, right? And traits build actions. So what I'm doing now as I go through is I'm going to pull a series of traits out and use those traits to really define what it's going to be. So resilience, thralls receive a +2 from AC from natural armor. So what I've done is I build a trait called resilience and I pack a little bit more in. It increases the AC. The attacks, again, same as the base creature. And as I said here, with special attacks and qualities, you really don't have those, you just have traits. Now here's magical puissance, right? It says a Thrall of Coot casts all spells and uses all spell-like abilities at +2 caster level. Now one of the core differences between 5e and 3.5 is sort of how the power curve's set up. I had a character at one point in 5e that had then 3.5 that had a 42 armor class. You're never going to see that sort of top-end power curve in 5e. One of the things they've done in 5e, which I appreciate for design, is they've sort of flattened that power curve. So what that does is that changes things a little bit. So instead of bumping the spell save by +2 per caster level, I bump it for +1. Because one of the things that happens with thralls is they also get a bump in their base stats. They become more intelligent, and I've chosen to have them become a little bit more charismatic too, which I'll show you in my adaptation. So if you were to give them a +2 on top of that, you'd be bumping their CC 3 or 4 points, and that's just kind of a little bit beyond the curve. They should be really terrifying magical foes that spells get you and are hard to resist, but they shouldn't absolutely blow the power curve. That's just unfair to your players. And although you want your players to constantly be challenged and constantly be pushed to the sort of the power bell curve, you don't want to ever be unfair to them in terms of the overall design. Now, your mileage may vary a little bit here. One of the things that I do with my players all the time is I give them hero points, and I give them tons of inspiration that's constantly rolling in the background because I want them to have that sort of as a buffer against really aggressive designs on my part. But if you don't choose to do that with your campaign, you can always choose to say, I don't want to give them that additional +1 DC. That's not fair based on the power curve that I have set up. That's part of the art of being a DM and designing effectively. So Mage's Sight. This one's real easy to port over. The Thrall's eyes glow an eerie blue and allow it to see magical emanations from all objects and creatures. This ability duplicates the Detect Magic spell. The ability aids the Thrall in retrieving magic items for the Egg of Coot. Absolutely true. So you just make Detect Magic with the same sort of special effects, the same sort of emanations out of it for the players. So the trade I made is Mage's Sight, ported the name over, and they throw blue, and he can cast Detect Magic. That's almost a word-for-word port over. That's pretty powerful, that's pretty useful. Now, fast healing in D&D. A Thrall heals 1 point of damage each round as long as it has more than 1 hit point. If reduced to 1 hit point, it attempts to flee to the island of Coot. It must reach the island of Coot within 1 week or be utterly destroyed. Once it's allowed to rest on the island of Coot, the Thrall gains 1 hit point after 1 hour and then resumes healing at the rate of 1 hit point per round. Oh, kind of okay, but things changed. And this is where you start to see some interpretations that I've made to get the flavor that I want out of the Thralls. So the trait now is called Regeneration. And the Thrall regains 5 hit points at the start of its turn as long as it's above 0 hit points. If reduced to 1 hit point, it attempts to flee and find a safe place to commune with the Coot. It must commune within 1 week or be utterly destroyed. Once it is able to take a long rest in the presence of another Thrall or in a space attuned to the Coot, the Thrall gains 1 hit point after 1 hour and then resumes healing at the rate of 1 hit point per round. So, one of the things that I've been doing is I've been building sort of these networks of Coot agents. It's almost like a, network's a very specific term, and it's loaded with a little bit of stuff, but I think it applies here. So they have an interconnectivity. If one Thrall of Coot can get to another Thrall of Coot, that Thrall of Coot can help them heal and commune back with the Coot. And what that going down into negative hit points or going to 1 hit point really reflects is them being taken out. Now, one thing I've been doing in the game is when the Thrall drops below 0, they turn to blue goo and they disintegrate. What that really does is that yeah, it would. Thanks, PJ. It would. So, but what that does is that, sort of removes the body from, we're going to interrogate it, we're going to look through it. And it's one of the ways that the Coot makes its thralls kind of undetectable. The body dissolves and disappears. So, but what we're doing here is we're making the ability to recharge based on a space attuned to the Coot, which my players are going to find out more about as they move through it. And for you as a DM, I think it's just a matter of, okay, if you have the Coot have safe houses, or if you have him have converted temples, or if you have him have gates or nodes that are special to him, then those would be places where people could attune. I'm also allowing my PC or my NPCs, my thralls, to go find another Thrall of Coot and have that guy reestablish the connection with the egg. Now you don't have to do that. You can go back to, they got to go back to the island of Coot if they are damaged that way. You can do that if you want to. I'm doing it to make the bad guys a little bit more resilient and make them persistent and annoying to my PCs. All right, let's go back to resilience here. And resilient was an extraordinary ability. And the Egg of Coot's domination toughens the creature's vital area. A thrall takes 1d6 less damage from successful sneak attack, and it takes 1/2 the original damage normally dealt by a critical hit. Not really a clean port between 3.5 and 5e. So what I've done is I've built sort of a trait based on adamantine. So I made resilient. The Egg of Coot's domination toughens the critical's vital areas. A thrall is immune to extra damage from critical hits. And I gave it a damage resistances, and I lined them up bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons. So just like if you're wearing adamantine armor, thralls don't get that crit. So, and then I sort of stepped into the immunities that were there, and I've sort of rolled them over into that 5e template. So a Thrall of Coot is immune to mind-affecting effects, poison, charm, and sleep effects, paralysis, and stunning. So in 5e, these are documented immunities in the stat block, but they refer to a specific effects, right? So there's a number of effects that I'm going to make them immune to. The damage immunities would be poison. Condition immunities would be charmed, frightened, poisoned, and stunned. So the Thrall's body is really just imbued with all this energy from the Coot, from the EGG, the Egg of Coot, right? That makes him totally a Thrall and servant. Can't scare him, can't charm him, his body's immune to poison, and you can't stun him. He's also immune to non-magical weapons. They're very tough, and they need to be. This is the background big bad in this particular campaign. Now, the base saves were kind of changed a little bit also in the 3.5 version. You got Iron Will. The Thrall's mind has been honed to resist the strongest of attacks. It gains a +2 bonus on will saves. All their saves are the same as the base creature. What I did is I just basically gave them proficiency in wisdom saves if they didn't have it based on their original class. And that goes back to sort of the discussion I had about DCs. You don't want to make them absolutely impossible to take down, but you want to make them, how I refer to this, is bouncy. All right, these things are tough enough that your PCs really have to stack a ton of resources against the Thrall and just keep hammering it to fall down. A good encounter with a Thrall of Coot should either lead to them being evasive and getting away, which if you've been watching the stream you've seen, or it should lead the players to going, how much did we have to dump into that thing? Oh my god. And that really sets the tone for if you're going to have a confrontation with the Coot himself long term, which I may or may not be doing, or if you're going to have a really hard confrontation with some of his top-end assets, you want to set the stage for those not being easy at all, and also give the player sort of a palette of things that they begin to understand as these belong to the Coot's agents. So, all right. Ability. So what they did in 3.5, what we did, is it was +2 strength, +4 intelligence, and a -6 charisma. -6 charisma doesn't make sense to me, so these are the new and improved, much more scarier. Also, with 5e, Warlock becomes very interesting, and I see Thralls and Warlocks of the Coot being common, and that's a charisma-based stat, so I've changed things a little bit here, and this is total Tad bias. So there's a trait called Infused with Might. The -6 charisma I'm turned into a +4 charisma, and I'm using a +4 con. And a couple reasons for that. It's a campaign logic thing for me. I make them much more tough. And I talk about the +4 con a little bit later also when we talk about some of the feats that they had in 3.5, specifically toughness. So skills. Thrall has a +8 racial bonus on knowledge, arcana, spellcraft, and use magic device. Otherwise, same as the base creature. So I made a trait called use magic device. And the Thrall ignores all class, race, and level restrictions on the use of the magic items. That's very much like the thief ability of the same name. And the Thrall automatically has proficiency on arcana. And I also made a trait called bound by its mind, which is a couple things packed into long term. It bound by its mind gives the Thrall advantage on all arcana checks, and it has proficiency in the skill. So if your NPC Thrall makes an arcana check, you're going to give him advantage. So in the old 3.5 thing with feats, Thralls of Coot gain Iron Will and Toughness. So I've already talked to you how I'm handling Thrall, Iron Will. And by Toughness, I just bumped the Thrall's con. So they have more hit points, but we're not using Toughness specifically as a feat. That gets you the same net effect. Climate, terrain, same as the base creature. Now Tad's bias is the Thrall was Dave's plot device of choice, so put the Thralls on anything and use those things that you put them on anywhere that helps your story. That's what you should do. That's what you should be focused on. And then challenge rating. This is something very specific. And I think you got to be sort of sensitive to this, right? So same as a base creature, +2 was what they did before. They also had a +3 level adjustment, which really isn't relevant here. I would say players that become Thralls of Coots become NPCs. But the CR rules in 5e are really up to the DM's interpretation in a lot of ways. So Tad's take, you can take the CR at a +2 or even +3 if it's a lower level creature. Higher +1 or even no adjustment, just depending on what's going on. And you just kind of have to play that by ear. I think the other thing you've got to consider is if it is if the creature is primarily a fighting creature and doesn't necessarily get a lot of benefits from spells, that may not be worth any bump at all. All right. If it's a spellcaster that gets, or something with a lot of innate spells, you're going to want to give it a +2 or +3. Again, to be fair to your players. So, okay, I've sort of gone here and see, PC Thralls become NPCs. All right. So pull it together. So I'm just going to run you through what the template would actually look like. So their alignment always becomes neutral willing, neutral evil, saving throws, iron wills and traits, skills, arcana, see bound by its mind, damage resistances are from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical weapons, has damage immunity to poison, condition immunity for a charm, frightened, poison, and stunned, challenge or rating. I really think the DM should calculate it. Here's the traits laid out for you, one right after the other. Bound by its mind. The Thrall cannot be put to sleep by magic and does not need to sleep. The Thrall has advantage on all arcana skill checks and has proficiency in this skill. Iron Will. The Thrall's mind has been honed to resist even the strongest of attacks. It gets +2 bonus on will saving throws, which I dropped in there, and I also gain proficiency. And Fused with Might. Strength +2, Con +4, Int +4, Charisma +4. Magic Passance. The Thrall of Coot casts all spells at +1 DC for saves. Mage's Sight, that is the glowing blue eyes and detect magic ability. And that glowing blue eyes thing became, in the MMORPG campaign, pretty iconic for everybody. Regeneration, and it should be 5 hit points per round, as the original text says. Thanks for that, PJ. Resilient, here is the additional AC, and then use magic device. Now finally what I did is I want to show you how that applies. So I went and I pulled Spirit Naga, and Spirit Naga straight out of the 5e SRD, and I brought it in, and it's a pretty tough creature, right? It's got some spell casting, it's got rejuvenation, it's got some decent stats already, it's got some decent saving throws already, it's got some damage immunities, it's not, it's immune to charmed and poisoned already. Speaks Abyssal in common, it's a CR8, it's got a bite, pretty decent bite, bunch of spells that it casts. So what I did is I ported that over, and I want to show you sort of the changes. So it goes to neutral evil. AC goes up by 2 to 15. Hit points go up by 20 to 95. Its stats go to 20, 17, stays the same, 18, 20, and 15, so it bumps those things. That makes the saving throws go up a little bit too, so it's tough to get a spell past it. I played with giving them magic resistance, but that just seemed too over the top, right? It just, they're already tough enough. If the players can't get spells through on them, that's just not getting fair to them. It's got a relatively high AC, fair amount of hit points, and its spells punch hard, so you need to make them a little bit of a glass cannon. The fact that it constantly regenerates is, as my players will point out, stunningly annoying, especially because Thralls of Coot come with minions. They always have dudes. Bumped the CR to 10 here because it lifts the spells so much, and I thought that was fair. Rejuvenation stays. The spellcasting now have a DC save and a +8 to hit. That's pretty nasty. Now, because it's CR10, you're not going to have lower level people coming after it. You're going to have, at a bare minimum, 6th and 7th level characters dealing with it. But still, that puts it on the top end of the power curve, and some of its spells are going to get through. You have to be a little careful when you're picking spells. One of the things that I've been giving Thralls in the campaign so far, and it hasn't really gotten through because my players freak out and drop all their resources on it when it happens. But if you've got a Crown of Madness spell that's got a base DC of ridiculous, that's going to get through people. And that's the sort of spell that can trash your party if you're not careful. So I'm not so worried about it because I do give people inspiration. I give them a lot of hero points to work with. If you don't have those things in your campaign, just be aware that a really high DC on some of these spells can be imbalancing and really lethal for your players. And you always want to be fair. So just be aware of your spell choice. And sometimes I absolutely design to my players' weaknesses. Absolutely. I think that makes for interesting encounters. But you can't do that all the time. It's not fair to them. They have to be the heroes. So you want to just be aware of that and do that very judiciously. Now, the template, again, lays all this stuff out. So added in all the information to the template so you can see that again. And here are the actions, the +8 to hit and a 1d6 +5. So what you have here, when you take that and you apply to a Spirit Naga Thrall of Coot's pretty tough. It bumps up by 2 CR, absolutely, but it becomes very hard to hit. Its spells are going to come through. And one of the things I liked about this when I was looking at it and I was trying to find something out in the SRD to convert for you is if the Naga returns to life, it comes back anyhow. And for the metagamers in the stream that might be playing this game, you'll never see a Spirit Naga Thrall of Coot. Why would I do that and show my hand? So I am going to be doing Blackmoor Design Diary again. I was doing it for quite a bit, and I got a few questions about, hey Tad, can you talk about what you're doing to convert it from 3.5 to 5e? And so I thought I would hop in here and show y'all a little bit what that looked like, and start to give everybody a feeling of how I'm approaching things. So thanks for sticking your head in. It's a quick half-hour stream. Just putting it out there so everybody has it. If you have any questions, you can always, bop over and shoot stuff to me. My email is kilgoreslair@gmail.com. And, of course, you can watch all the stuff that we do, and we stream every Saturday at 3 o'clock Eastern. You can watch the stuff we do over at Kilgore's Lair on Facebook, Kilgore's Lair over on YouTube, or Tadkill is our Twitch channel, which you're on right now. So, thanks for your time, and with there once and always, y'all have a great day now.